Hi, you're with Julian on the Brown Notes and some reviews of music. First for a while, and I've got a backlog already, so try and get through about 5 or 6 in the next week or so. Four Tet's new album, which is called 3, has recently been released. Kieran Hebden, aka Four Tet, has become one of the most established electronic music producers and artists this century, alongside the likes of his peers, probably like John Hopkins or Nicholas Jarre. People that have established themselves very firmly as album artists, producers and collaborators. And it all reached a peak last year for Mr. Hebden in one of the most innovating and satisfying moments in Coachella. Wasn't that mad that Coachella passed by this year and virtually no one spoke about it? That's how far it's fallen, and music festivals in general. But when Frank Ocean pulled out of the Sunday night headline slot, and it was filled by Blink 182 and also Skrillex, Fred again, and Four Tet, where this, trendy underground electronic music producer got to be on the biggest stage, and it was all very happy. So for this to be his album after that moment is such a bizarre thing. He's made many, many good albums, perhaps the finest being the likes of Pink. Definitely Rounds from 2003 really put his name on the map. There Is Loving You is still my favourite. Pink was very good as well. And virtually everything he's done has been interesting or listenable, and he's varied the position his music takes often. So for him to do this album 3 now, at a point where he's so well established and has just got all of this extra attention that he didn't even ask for, and to release the lowest key, most boring record I think he's ever done, is completely baffling. I don't know who this album's made for, or where it's come from, or why it was made. So the opening track, Loved, it's got a sort of Meters-esque funky break, heralding probably the fact that the whole album would fit into almost ambient, downbeat, trip-hop instrumentals, very much background music, and like very low-key synth pads. And not sounds that I've ever, every single sound I think on this whole album just feels like it was sampled from something that was made maybe 10 or 15 years ago. The second track, Gliding Through Everything, is just new age pap. It just doesn't really compel. It feels empty. Storm Crystals, it's better and it's got more substance, but it's just another drifting track, and it doesn't. The problem with this kind of ambient approach is that there's nothing compelling about the moods. They're not strong enough moods to make you interested in continuing to listen. And any time a track sort of launches where you think this one's going to be more interesting, it waters it down. I thought Daydream Repeat had a bit more drive, reminding me of the brilliant duo Swearing Alert Fuck Buttons, who are a brilliant band, and I love their albums, and they seem to have disappeared a bit, but there's some noise at the start and some pulse, and there's this sort of like cascading motif on it that reminded me of the main bit of Res by Underworld. But again, even though the initial minute is really the most exciting on the album, it again just sort of washes it out into this greyness. There's some alt-rock vibes on Skater. And now we come into some tracks that sound vaguely like the weaker instrumentals on Moby's Play. I thought actually the one track that did have some percussive interest on it was track 6, 31 Bloom, which did have this sort of livity sound, pevilist, sort of glitchy, twitchy beat on it, which was probably the high point. So Blue is another Moby Play also ran, and 3 Drums, the epic closer, is just too vague. I like the shoegazy atmosphere a bit more, but none of these tracks are thick enough in their atmosphere or interesting enough in their instrumentation. It's all, my first ambient trip hop album. Who is this made for? Like, Kieran Hebden's audience aren't asking for this from him at this stage. It's too rote and ordinary and perfunctory and boring and generic. Like, no one needs this from Four Tet at the moment. Not where he is, not what he's done in the past. It's texturally really limp. It's like going to a homewares shop and, like, initially you're sort of like, oh, there's lots of interesting things. Actually, no, they're not. It's like, I think it veers on the side of bad for me. It's like tepid bathwater, but instead of being just warm enough, it's getting too cold. And that's why I think it's a negative for me, which is unexpected. But, I don't expect one of the most acclaimed and preeminent music artists, electronic music artists of the century to be delivering such ordinary products and such boring products. So a 4 out of 10 for Four Tet's 3, sadly.